Back again on an incredibly important news day. It is July 16th, and I am joined right now by my good friend, Larry Klayman, legal expert and founder of Judicial Watch and Freedom Watch. And Larry, I'm so happy to have you with us today after this historic summit in Helsinki between President Trump and President Putin.
Thank you, Jason. I was just going to say the only thing I haven't found is Baywatch.
That's right. And people can support Freedom Watch by going to freedomwatchusa.org. Larry has, of course, been actively trying to become a new special counsel so that we can investigate Robert Mueller and his potentially criminal special counsel investigation. People can sign that petition at freedomwatchusa.org. And of course, you can join the Justice League by clicking right on this attractive graphic that features Larry as a legal superhero. We need citizens' grand juries to bring the power back into the hands of the people. We cannot allow criminals like Hillary Clinton to run rampant throughout our country and the world as she has for so many years. Larry, I'm so pleased that you were able to take time out of your incredibly busy day, and I know you are busy, so I want to get right to it. I personally found that summit to be historic, amazing, and I thought President Trump performed brilliantly. We're seeing the deep state dunces around the country and around the world, highly paid morons like, I don't know, Anderson Cooper. They're in overdrive trying to say that President Trump was a disgrace. What do you think about that?
Well, you have to ask yourself the question, as we've said before, why do these leftists, who are socialists, okay, Russia is a socialist country, it used to be communist, why are they so much against President Trump for talking to, in fact, what is their homeland, which is Russia? These people have more affinity for Russia and the former Soviet Union than they ever had for this country. And a lot of them are simply communists. I call CNN the communist news network, CNN. Right. So it's total hypocrisy, but even worse than that, because I think we're at the point where no one takes the Anderson Coopers or the Don Lemons or the Jake Tappers or the rest of them seriously anymore. Although they do whip up the left and they're whipping up violence against conservatives and others, is John Brennan, the former director of the CIA, who issued a tweet accusing the president of treason. And it's unbelievable because here's a guy who is the former head, not head, but he's a former member of the Communist Party. And it's widely believed with a lot of credibility that he converted to Islam a number of years ago. In fact, he had a prayer rug in his office at the CIA. This is the guy who is castigating and trashing the president. And he's also the guy who is behind a lot of the illegal, unconstitutional surveillance, not just of the president and his associates and his families, but also of hundreds of millions of Americans who were being invaded in terms of their privacy, their phone calls, their social media, and everything else without probable cause in violation of the Fourth Amendment. Who I effectively enjoined through the NSA and the CIA years ago from doing this kind of thing. So, you know, yes, Trump was brilliant, but I wanted to add that because the people that are going after him, they're criminals. They're subverting justice and they're subverting the Constitution by trying to destroy our president.
I agree with you, Larry. I think the most telling aspect of what's happening right now, just in the mere hours since that historic press conference and presidential summit took place, we're seeing a ton of talk on CNN, on MSNBC, even on Fox, which I know you're a fan of. They're talking about how, you know, Trump was kowtowing to Putin, and they're upset that Trump didn't agree with the intelligence community's assessment that Russia hacked. But I think, I mean, I know you agree with me. We've seen no evidence that Russia has hacked. And what kind of a diplomatic summit would it be if Trump went in there guns a-blazing, accusing Putin of doing something for which there was no evidence. Now, your background, of course, is as a prosecutor, and we should hope even Vladimir Putin would be considered innocent until proven guilty. What can you say about those aspects of the meeting?
What is really telling, and the president raised a very good point at his press conference this morning, is that the server of the Democratic National Committee was never turned over to the FBI. They refused to do that. So how do you come to the conclusion, the definitive conclusion, that Russians hacked the DNC when no one has ever analyzed forensically at the FBI or any place else the server? And obviously the Democratic National Committee and the Hillary Clinton presidential campaign didn't want to have access or give access to that to these law enforcement agencies because of the fact that they were unlikely to show that, in fact, Russia did hack, number one, and number two, that they were obviously committing crimes. But here's something, I want to correct something about Fox, too. I'm not a great fan of Fox News. I'm really not. It's become entertainment. It's not for real. And that's why I prefer to be on your show. I prefer to be on InfoWars, because I can say what I really believe. Fox plays both sides of the street. I mean, last week they were giving all these accolades to Trey Gowdy, who just yesterday came out on Face the Nation and said that he's not in favor of the impeachment of Rod Rosenstein. Before that, he took a dive on the Benghazi investigation. Before that, he praised Mueller as a man of great integrity. Fox, like these politicians, talks out of both sides of its mouth because they want to keep advertisers, because they want to further their ratings. And they get that by trying to placate all sides. Sure, they are right of center. Sure, they're pro-Republican, establishment Republican. But Fox is not the be-all and end-all, though I do watch it because it's certainly more accurate than CNN or MSNBC. But your show, InfoWars, Mike Savage, and others, it's much more straight up. And at least you can say what you really believe on your shows. And we need these citizens' grand juries. I can't mention that on Fox. I can't talk about that. Fox is blackballing Sheriff Joe Arpaio. Fox has blackballed Judge Roy Moore, who's a good man and was unfairly accused. Fox blackballed my client Cliven Bundy because he called African Americans Negroes, the same thing that Martin Luther King referred to them. He didn't mean anything wrong about that. In fact, he was equating himself to the plight of the Negro in the Old South, how they were mistreated, like he was being mistreated. So I don't want to go on a jihad against Fox, but I want people to be clear that Fox News does not give you the straight-up news that you can get elsewhere, and that's why you have to go to your site, other sites, to get it.
I agree with you, Larry, and you've just hit on a key point that permeates all of these things. Fox being a multi-million or even possibly a multi-billion-dollar organization, they rely on advertising, and I think that's a huge problem. It's something I'm trying to eliminate with Crowdsource the Truth. So if we have micro-sponsors throughout the country and throughout the world, there's no one individual interest that can sway their news reporting. And I want to take you back to what you were saying about Trey Gowdy on Face the Nation, or was that where he was? Because that's very important. A lot of people, including myself, were initially quite impressed with Trey Gowdy's performance in, he's yelling at Hillary Clinton quite a lot. But as you've just pointed out, there are a number of things that indicate that Trey Gowdy may be doing what's called a limited hangout. He gains our trust by doing a certain amount of things that seem honest and sensible. But as I've learned from my associate Jan Weinberg, Trey Gowdy's campaign was funded quite a bit by Boeing and other military industrial contractors that maybe don't have the interest of the American people at heart. So there's a lot of these limited hangouts going on. Now, to take it back to Mr. Mueller and his probe, there was this article just the other day in True Pundit, which was talking about how these indictments, which I found the timing very coincidental with the Trump-Putin summit today, for these indictments of 12 Russians to come out just last Friday was quite surprising to me. And True Pundit is saying that Mr. Mueller has plagiarized the right-wing journalist George Webb. Have you had a chance to review this at all, Larry? Are you familiar with this matter?
I've looked at it quickly. It's been a hectic day, and I didn't want to miss it. But that doesn't come as any surprise, because this man is very dishonest. He's not a man of integrity. Look at what he did just last week, issuing these phony indictments against the 12 Russian intel officers. If that was legit, he could have done that a lot sooner without trying to throw a monkey wrench into this summit with Vladimir Putin, without trying to humiliate the President of the United States. He's evil. He is pure evil, and that's why our citizens' grand juries, Jason, are attempting to take him out legally, and we must do it. For instance, on September 4th, we have documents that are going to be produced which will likely show criminal grand jury leaks. We'll use those in our citizens' grand juries to have him indicted, convicted, sentenced, and we will seek peacefully and legally to have him arrested along with the Clintons, along with Comey, along with Obama, along with Brennan, the rest of them. Because we, the people, need to rise up, and I hope people will go to freedomwatchusa.org. Please donate. This is very costly, but it's our last hope, short of a violent revolution, which I don't want to see. It's the only way we can do this legally and peacefully. So I really want people to contribute to us. It's tax deductible. We need the help, and we need the support. We need the volunteers, and we're going to start these citizens' grand juries on September 25th in Dallas, Texas. So we have a concrete date. And we're working for that, and we have to prepare, and we need the support. So yes, Mueller, he's a sleazeball. There's no other way to describe him. Okay, the people that work with him are as bad as he is, Andrew Weissman and the others. He's two-faced, he's dishonest, he's unethical, and frankly, he needs to be legally removed quickly before he destroys not just the presidency, but this country. And as far as the Russians are concerned, whether they did it or not, it's our fault for letting it happen under the Obama administration, because we do the same thing to them. You know, Putin at the press conference this morning, Jason, was laughing at the AP reporter who asked him to try to embarrass both him and President Trump if he got dirt on President Trump. And he laughed at them and he said, you know, I was the former head of the KGB. He says, I know the way dossiers work. He basically said, of course I tried to get dirt on Trump, and they tried to get dirt on me. That's the way it works. And that doesn't mean that you can't have a dialogue with a major ally, frankly, whose military, in terms of its nuclear arsenal, is now more powerful than even our own. And President Trump is doing the right thing. He's trying to modernize our nuclear forces. But right now, we're behind. So you don't want to provoke a fight with a country like that. You want to try to get along, and you want to try to find common ground in Syria with regard to Israel, get the Iranians out. You want to deal with other very pressing issues like North Korea and Iran. And for these leftists in the media, and Anderson Cooper's the least of them, frankly, it's worse even on MSNBC, or as Mark Levin says, MSLSD. It's something that you just can't take seriously. And what I really admire about President Trump is that he doesn't let the media or anybody else tell him what to do. And he does what he thinks is right. And this is right. And he's not worried about the blowback, and he's not worried about the appearances. And that's the kind of president that we need to have, and that's why we need to take these criminals out legally. Hillary Clinton, who just recently is intimating she's running for president again. She'll never give up. She hasn't thrown away her broom. She'll ride that to the very end. And we've got Mueller, we've got Comey, and we've got Obama, who's out there in his $8 million mansion after, for 8 years he pretended he was a man of the people. $8 million in Calorama, Washington, orchestrating with George Soros the overthrow of the Trump presidency in this country. These people need to be legally destroyed. And the way we do that is to rise up with the citizens' grand jury. So people can go to freedomwatchusa.org. Please contribute. This is super expensive. We've got to draw jurors from voter rolls. We've got to try cases. We've got to pay judges, retired judges, to hear this. We've got to execute on the convictions that we get. We've got to seek to enforce the convictions through citizens' arrest peacefully and legally. So we really need the help. Thank you, Jason, for having me on today.
Yeah, and these grand juries aren't going to impanel themselves, Larry. So I definitely want to commend you on the legal chess game that you're playing with Mr. Mueller. I find it absolutely fascinating, and I had the privilege of being there in Judge Emmett Sullivan's courtroom where you won that move of the chess game as far as compelling Mueller's special counsel office to turn over these documents that you suspect will reveal these grand jury leaks. And that's critical because it's not necessarily about one gigantic blow to take him out, but these strategic maneuvers to render his investigation powerless to continue with its illegal operations. So just briefly on this plagiarism thing, so you think that that's likely, that he could have seen this suit and taken elements from it and rushed it again? How would he have known about it? How would he have found it? How does Robert Mueller, out of all the lawsuits going, that all the information available on PACER, how does he pluck out this George Webb Swigert versus John Podesta lawsuit?
He's got tremendous resources, Jason. He's spent tens of millions of dollars already. He's got the FBI at his beck and call. He's got the CIA and the NSA at his beck and call. Of course they can find this. I'm sure you agree, by the way.
Well, I agree that he's got the FBI. My question is this lawsuit from George Webb legitimate, or is it something that's in this giant cocktail of disinformation? Because it seems to me there's been a ton of disinformation coming about. Just last week, we had this Seth Rich press conference. There's been a ton of information about Seth Rich relative to the leaks. They're trying to tell us that Russia hacked. It seems to me John Podesta thought it was Eric Braverman who had provided these leaks of Hillary Clinton's email and DNC information. You know, all these things have been conflated into this giant mess that nobody can make heads or tails of very easily, and I find it to be a disinformation campaign. Could Mueller be involved in that, trying to distract from this Trump push?
Well, why do you think the indictments of the 12 Russian intel officers came out just a day before the summit, a working day before the summit? You think that was accidental? You think that's kosher, so to speak? Do you think that's the way a prosecutor should do things?
That's Trafe, Larry.
That political way? This guy's ultimate sleaze.
Yes.
And he's working with the deep state and the intelligence agencies and the FBI to destroy the president. I mean, and no one on Fox really says anything about that. That's unbelievable. See, this is why, I don't care about going on Fox anymore. Okay, I really don't. Because I can't say what I really believe. And the American people need to hear it straight up. They don't get it from Fox.
Right.
They get something better than CNN and MSNBC, but frankly, it's watered down BS most of the time.
Right.
So we need to hear the truth. We don't have time for anything less than that. And the fact that now they're putting on people to try to tear the president down for the summit tells you that they're part of this Republican establishment swamp. Yeah, Hannity takes a strong position on Hannity every night. You know why? Because it boosts his ratings, because he doesn't want to lose advertisers, but he never ever says what needs to be done. The same people are on every single night. And it's, oh, we got more information. Well, what good is the information without using that information and evidence to bring people to justice? And that's what we're seeking to do with the citizens' grand juries, where the American people can mete out justice on their own, peacefully and legally, as Justice Antonin Scalia confirmed in a case in 1992, United States versus Williams, that the grand jury belongs to the people, not to the government. So yes, I'm tired of listening to Fox News. I'm tired of entertainment. I want the truth.
Your citizens grand jury effort, Larry, is one of the most impressive things that I've heard about in a long time. I definitely want to encourage people to go to freedomwatchusa.org and learn more about that and contribute to the efforts that you're making, because as you've said, this is really a rare example of someone, yourself, who's got the capability to do something, actually doing something. I mean, I don't know how to impanel a grand jury, but I know that you certainly do. And I'm really excited to learn that you said September 25th in Dallas. Was that it?
I hope you'll be there and cover it. We want other media to cover it as well. We are deadly serious about this in the figurative sense, of course.
Right.
Because we have no choice, Jason. And people should go to our website at freedomwatchusa.org. We've now got nearly 27,000 people on the petition to also name me special counsel, because that would be a 1-2 punch. But read the comments that people are making. What they're saying is, and they're agreeing with me, Larry, I'm tired, excuse of the French, of the bullshit.
Yeah.
I'm tired of listening to entertainment on Fox News and elsewhere. I want action. I don't care how much information people have gotten. I don't care if my former group, Judicial Watch, has documents. If you don't do anything with the documents, what good is it? So we have to go in front of a grand jury. We got enough evidence right now to indict, to convict, and to put these people away for life, which is where they should be.
I think people are excited to see that.
People are saying that, and you got to read their comments. It's unbelievable.
Yeah,
that people are getting smart.
I agree. I think people are excited to see action, Larry, because there's only so much we can do, and this is really how people can get involved. I'm going to make it my business to be there and cover that citizens grand jury. So let me take you to another aspect of this, because you and I have spoken about this quite a bit. Obviously, they're saying the intelligence communities have come to this assessment, but as you've pointed out, the FBI hasn't even investigated the servers. It's this company, CrowdStrike, which of course was created by former FBI agent Sean Henry and Russian expatriate Dmitry Alperovitch. So these are the only guys to examine the evidence that we would certainly hope that the FBI would be examining, and then they came to a conclusion that doesn't seem so accurate to me. I'm very troubled by these special contractors to the intelligence agencies that are created by former members of the intelligence agencies, because it seems like a very obvious way to funnel money to an agency that is maybe insulated from some of the laws that are intended to prevent the FBI, the CIA, the NSA from doing things just like this. What do you think about that?
Well, yes. I mean, there are many ways that they do it, Jason. And I have a very good friend here in Hollywood, David Marconi, who is a writer. He wrote Enemy of the State with Will Ferrell and Gene Hackman. And not Will Ferrell, but Will Smith.
Right.
It's not comedy, I might add. But he foresaw this coming, okay? And that these intelligence agencies are more powerful than the President of the United States.
Yes.
They are their own separate government. And they're in it for power, they're in it for money. And even though you have these so-called Republican establishment politicians now at the head of, say, the CIA, Dan Coates, the Director of National Intelligence, and you have this woman who's being installed at the CIA and others, they are part of this establishment. And they are, in fact, adversaries of the president. Now, let me say one other thing. I don't know whether the Russians hacked or not, but I'll tell you something. I don't believe a word that the deep state intelligence agencies say. Yeah. They are corrupt to the core, and they have their own agenda. And again, the Russians, ironically, and I don't advocate violating the law or conducting illegal surveillance, but the Russians actually did us a favor if, in fact, they did it during the campaign. We wouldn't have found out what was going on at the DNC or with John Podesta, the campaign manager of Hillary Clinton. Frankly, I'm glad if they did it or somebody did it. Because all of Hillary Clinton's emails, including John Podesta's and everybody else's, were on the servers of the National Security Agency. No one ever bothered to get them. They're still there on those servers. Right. That's an absolute disgrace. So this country is being run by a bunch of criminals in the intelligence agencies who don't cooperate. And then you've got these do-nothing, zero people running the FBI, like the director, Christopher Wray, frankly, who's a disgrace. You've got Sessions, who's a disgrace. You've got Rosenstein, who's a disgrace. No one wants to do anything, and the people need to rise up and take this country back. And the way we can do that peacefully and legally are the citizens' grand juries. And I need everybody's participation here. It's our last hope.
Absolutely, and I'm looking forward to that. Everyone should go to freedomwatchusa.org and learn more about the citizens' grand juries and how they can help with the process. So Larry, I've noticed that, as I said, some of the biggest dopes in the world, including John McCain, have just come out immediately against the president, and I like to sometimes sit back and just look at, as it is referred to, the metadata, the information surrounding the information of these events. And, I think that what Donald Trump was doing was a great example of diplomacy, establishing a relationship with Putin, talking about our mutual interests. I think there were subtle ways that both men shared points of disagreement. Putin obviously much more in favor of Iran and saying that the Iran deal has made Iran the most controlled country in the world, ensuring that their nuclear program will never be used to manufacture weapons. I'm not sure I agree with that. But it just reeks of all of these deep state guys in the death throes of, really being scared by this concept that Mr. Putin brought up, which was the potential for a joint U.S. Russian criminal investigation into these allegations of hacking. Now, again, going back to your prosecutorial training, doesn't it seem reasonable that if the Russians are being accused of all this, they should come to the table in an open way, respond to the allegations, have an opportunity to present their evidence? I mean, something else that we've heard is that it's absolutely absurd to believe that a country as sophisticated as Russia would have left such obvious fingerprints all over a potential cyber attack. They would do anything within their power, their substantial power, to mask their involvement. They wouldn't leave it all over the place in the way that it's been described, right?
And you're absolutely right. But again, Jason, getting back to the way the real world works, at the Commerce Department, they have CIA officers there who help assist in analyzing foreign economies of adversaries. And the United States actively seeks to throw a monkey wrench into the economies of other countries, including Russia. I'm not saying there shouldn't be moral equivalent. There should be moral equivalency. There's not. But the fact that we let these things happen, that we don't have adequate defenses to cyber hacking,
right?
The fact that somebody tried to, as the intelligence agencies say, influence our elections, shame on us. Because we are doing the same thing overseas. Obama intervened in Israel. He tried to knock out the Likud party as prime minister and elsewhere. Because Obama's a Muslim. He doesn't like Likud because he views them as anti-Muslim. He's half Muslim, but in his heart he's all Muslim. And that's another example of what you can't say on Fox News. You'll never hear that. But everybody knows that. And it's not even in dispute.
Right.
And so this whole thing is a bunch of hypocrisy here. Because if we were going to gauge relationships with a foreign power and whether they're spying on us, we wouldn't have any relationships with even France or Italy. Because everybody spies on everybody.
Yeah.
And in fact, we were spying on the Prime Minister of Israel ourselves. That came out, after Edward Snowden disclosed this massive metadata. We spied on Brazil. We spied the president of Brazil. So it's total hypocrisy, And I got a theory here, and this may sound somewhat off the wall, but Anderson Cooper doesn't like Putin, okay? And I'm for rights for everybody, but Putin's very anti-gay, and that's one of the reasons why you see everybody on CNN hate his guts, because that's the way he is, and they're taking it personally. They should not take this personally.
Right. Well, I think that one of the things that President Putin said during his comments that I found extremely interesting, he referred to the private conversation that Donald Trump and he had, and specifically with their discussions about a joint cybersecurity effort between the United States and Russia, which certainly cybersecurity is one of the biggest concerns for any country right now, and I found that very interesting. Another interesting thing that Putin brought up was an individual named William Browder. Now, are you familiar with these matters pertaining to William Browder and Hermitage Capital, Larry?
Yeah, generally I am. Not probably to the extent that you are, but throw it out there, my good friend, and we'll deal with it.
Well, I just found it very interesting that Putin is talking about how Browder, a former U.S. citizen, had sent $400 million to the Clinton Foundation. And he also said that Browder and his associates had made over $1.5 billion exploiting assets in the former Soviet Union, and that they hadn't paid taxes on any of this in the United States or Russia. So what could we expect from a joint legal effort between these two countries? Could someone like Bill Browder, an obvious globalist criminal who's right there with the Clintons, seems like a pivotal player in this whole Clinton Foundation, gigantic financial criminal operation? What do you think we can expect from something like this?
Well, when it comes to our Justice Department, nothing. Nothing. Okay? When it comes from our legislative branch, a bunch of clowns up there who parade around, that hearing last week with Peter Strzok and closed-door sessions with Page, I mean, it's very entertaining. but we didn't learn anything new. And, you know, Trey Gowdy becomes the hero, and 3 days later he says, let's forget about Rosenstein. Let's let him continue on this witch hunt against the president. So, you know, nothing's going to happen there, but this can come in front of our citizens' grand juries. We can gather information. I look forward to your help in doing that. And we can bring indictments with respect to that as well. But it's not going to happen by our so-called government. Our government has broken away from the people. It's only for itself, and it's for enrichment. And, you know, as far as Putin saying, oh, they didn't pay Russian taxes, well, I doubt that he pays a lot of taxes, too, on all the money he stashed away somewhere, as most dictators do. But there has to be some truth to this in terms of the substance of it. And, of course, the Clintons are willing to deal with anybody who will line their pockets. We could do 25 shows back to back and barely scratch the surface on that one.
Right. Is Putin a dictator, or is he an elected president, Larry?
He's elected, but the way he's elected, and, you know, the Russian people, by the way, I'm Ukrainian origin myself, and my grandparents used to think that they came from Russia. I guess if word hadn't gotten down that far south yet, that they left before the Bolsheviks took over. But so I don't mean this as a slight against the Russian people, but the Russian people are very subservient. They like power. They want a so-called strong leader. They want to be told what to do. And in today's day and age, as long as they have the ability to go out and buy, you know, cosmetics if you're a woman, or buy a nice car if you're a man, they don't care that Putin, in fact, is in practice a dictator. He is. That's what he is.
Right. Okay, so let's shift gears back to that Peter Strzok testimony last week, because you and I haven't had much of a chance to speak about that. He was defiant, I would say. There was a moment where Bob Goodlatte was talking about Peter Strzok possibly being in contempt of Congress for not wanting to answer questions. Of course, Strzok was hiding behind the ever-present concept of not being able to talk about ongoing investigations. He really didn't say much of anything useful at all. What do you think? I mean, I know what you think is going to come of it, and the answer is nothing, but did Peter Strzok do anything there? Can he be held in contempt of Congress? How the hell is Peter Strzok doing all this crazy stuff, getting thrown out of the FBI? He still has his security clearance. He still has his pay. You know, we see people like Robin Gritz, we see people like Mike Dick. They're thrown out, they lose their security clearance right away.
Well, yeah, nothing's going to come of it, as you know, Jason, and a contempt of Congress citation is not worth the paper it's written on. Give me a quarter and I'll get a shoe shine before that happens, okay? Because, no, I mean, they never enforce them, and if they have to enforce them, they have to go to the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia, which is 90% Obama and Clinton hacks, with the exception of Judge Sullivan. He's the only one there who's been appointed by either of those two presidents that has any even minor degree of integrity. And I give Judge Sullivan a lot of credit, okay, because he's bucking up against the stream there, and he's doing what he thinks is right. But there are very few judges like that, and even the so-called conservative ones, with the exception of Royce Lamberth, they're worthless too. And, you know, where do you think it's the same mentality of Kavanaugh, you know, Brett Kavanaugh, Supreme Court Justice? They're part of this Washington swamp establishment, and they don't want to take any strong action because someday they might want to get higher appointments and the Democrats could block it. So it comes from both sides, and that's why, we need the donations. They're tax deductible to freedomwatchusa.org, because we need to do the citizens' grand juries, because it's not going to happen. I'm not just saying that. People may think, well, Larry Klayman's saying that's self-serving because he's looking for donations to Freedom Watch. He's looking for support. But let's go back 30, 40 years, 50 years. Nothing has happened. The Clintons haven't been held accountable. No one's been held accountable. Even Richard Nixon, he resigned as a patriot because he realized he was destroying the country, and he left voluntarily. He was never held accountable for obstruction of justice or bribery, which he clearly was involved in at the time.
I think he knew that Jerry Ford was going to pardon him when he left, but we can discuss that separately.
That was probably known. But you know what? Even with all the stuff that Nixon did, compared to these other presidents we've had, he comes out looking pretty good. You know, right?
Yeah, exactly. Watergate looks like a picnic compared to what's been going on with the Clinton Foundation.
In my lifetime, I mean, you've got Lyndon Johnson, you've got Nixon, And then you get all these other presidents, and with the exception of Reagan and Trump, they're all disasters, and/or frankly, they're all criminals.
Yeah.
I mean, Johnson, he had a taping system. He was actually soliciting bribes. You can hear it on C-SPAN. It's out there.
Wow.
Here's a guy who caused 55,000 deaths in Vietnam, hundreds of thousands of people injured because he lied and got us into that war with another false intelligence claim over the Gulf of Tonkin.
Right.
That never happened the way they said.
Right.
You've got Barack Obama who lied about it. His mouth was moving. He was lying.
Right.
And you got Clinton. I did not have sex with that woman. That was the least of his problems.
Right.
So, this is what we've had as presidents. And it's why it's time for us to clean the rat's nest out of Washington, D.C., and to do it ourselves.
I'm glad you mentioned that Gulf of Tonkin incident, Larry, because it's a good example that people should think back to, where a president should not necessarily just blindly follow the advice of the intelligence communities. Anderson Cooper and his CIA and NSA correspondents there were disparaging Donald Trump for not blindly following the assessments of the intelligence agencies. But as you and I have described in several shows, the intelligence agencies are trying to bring down Trump. We didn't vote for, James Clapper and John O'Brennan and all these guys that proliferate the clandestine agencies. Now, I also want to bring up something that you mentioned in our last conversation. You predicted that Brett Kavanaugh would be the selection, and you, although are a big supporter of Donald Trump, are not in support of Mr. Kavanaugh for Supreme Court. Talk a little bit more about that. What are your concerns here?
The reason for that is that you cannot have a justice of the Supreme Court that has trashed the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution. And here's what happened. We brought 3 lawsuits. There were rulings on at least one of them by a judge called Richard Leon, who was a so-called conservative judge, that found that this was unconstitutional, this mass surveillance. We got that right after Snowden came out and revealed that. And we had other whistleblowers who confirmed that. And that gave rise to the USA Freedom Act, which was supposed to put the protections in to illegal surveillance and spying without probable cause that a crime was being committed or that there was terrorism afoot. Now, as a result of that, the Obama Justice Department went back to the courts and said, well, we don't need these preliminary injunctions anymore because the USA Freedom Act has solved the problem and the issue's now moot. And here's the ultimate irony, is that 2 Clinton and Obama appointees on the appellate court in Washington, D.C., the D.C. Circuit, vacated those orders with no opinion because they found that just as a matter of law, as lawyers say, that those orders were moot. Our cases continued on. In fact, they're still on appeal right now.
What does that mean, Larry, for people who don't understand legal terminology, to vacate something without opinion?
Very good point. It means that it's nullified, okay? So you don't need it anymore. And these 2 judges of the D.C. Circuit made that assessment. Now, we know that the illegal surveillance has continued. We know it continued with Trump, with others,
Right.
with me, some of my clients, the American people. But Kavanaugh took it upon himself in what was an unethical and, in my view, illegal opinion that he wrote, because the order was moot. There's a general rule for judges: don't write something if you don't have to write it. So he issues an opinion of his own, contradicting the other 2 liberal judges and saying that this was perfectly legal under the Constitution, this mass surveillance without probable cause.
That's crazy.
And that is perfectly understandable because there should be an exception in times of terrorism. Well, that doesn't, we're going to always have terrorism. Okay? We'll always have that. But it doesn't mean that you get to violate everybody's Fourth Amendment rights. How can you have a Supreme Court justice who, for political reasons, to curry favor with the Bush-Cheney establishment, that started in a really big way, this illegal mass surveillance? It was under George W. Bush that it really began in a major way, and then Obama made it worse. He upped it. How can you have somebody like that on the Supreme Court? So, I'm praying that he is not confirmed, and I've offered actually to testify. I'm never going to be an ally of Chuck Schumer or anybody else, but I'm not alone, and Senator Rand Paul agrees with me. And I might say the one totally honest person on Fox News who I've gotten to know over the years, Judge Andrew Napolitano, who ironically used to have a show on Fox News called Freedom Watch. uh, he came out against this too.
Hmm.
And nobody else on Fox will say boo about it. Nobody. Shannon
Doesn't it
Breen mentioned
seem,
it.
doesn't it
But
seem
she,
crazy that as candidate Trump, our president was the subject of this illegal spying, and yet now he's selected for Supreme Court, the guy who seems like overturned the thing that would have stopped it?
yeah, he's getting bad advice, but look, he needs to focus on this. He also signed the reauthorization legislation for Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. They put it in front of him. They tell him, sign. This is stopping terrorism. You listen to Mike Pompeo. You listen to Dan Coates in the intelligence world. Pompeo was the CIA director at the time. And he's getting really bad advice because under 702, these intelligence agencies and the FBI can intercept any call continuously without probable cause. It's a loophole. And that's what was used by Susan Rice and Samantha Powell and Obama to unmask the communications of Trump advisors and colleagues and family illegally. It was the pretext to do that. So yes, the president has made a mistake, but look, the poor guy has so many things on his plate that it's hard to focus. And I hope that the American people will let President Trump know to withdraw this nomination. There are a lot of good judges that he had on that list, at least better than that anyway. And he could have picked one of those and still can. And I might add, it's not unprecedented. President Clinton had to withdraw the nomination, ironically, of Kimball Wood in the Southern District of New York. She was a district court judge. She's the one, by the way, that has the prosecution with regard to Stormy Daniels and Cohen. Okay, she's a former Playboy bunny. Okay.
Oh yeah, maybe. Right.
Yeah, and for whatever reason I can't quite remember right now, a scandal arose and he had to withdraw her name as a Supreme Court nominee. So I hope that the president will withdraw the name. It's not too late, and get somebody in there that respects our Constitution, the Fourth Amendment in particular, which I think is our most important amendment, because that's what was put into effect by our founding fathers, because King George III and his redcoats, his thugs, were busting into the homes of colonialists, stealing our property, roughing up our families, killing our cattle. Familiar with Bundy? Same thing.
Yeah.
And wreaking havoc on America.
And it's ironic that you mentioned King George, because it was just a few days ago that we heard so much about this very topic from Bill Binney, 32-year veteran of the National Security Administration, or agency, sorry, where he developed the Thin Thread program that was originally intended to scan these communications in a very anonymous way, looking for keywords that would give them probable cause to look into who the source of the communication was. And what Bill told me is that now they're just collecting everything, and if at any time they have any desire to look at what you, Larry, or I, or anybody listening right now, what they might be communicating about, they have the ability to restore any and all communications, telephone, text, whatever it might be. It's quite a scary capability. I mean, it really makes King George seem ineffective compared to what the government and the intelligence agencies can do now. And I feel very strongly that what we're witnessing in the wake of this Trump-Putin summit is like crying babies not getting what they want, realizing that the end of the line is in sight for them.
Absolutely. You know, I know Bill Binney. I represented him for a while along with 3 other whistleblowers. And they really terrorized these people, the National Security Agency, the FBI, and the rest. And some of them, one of them in particular, I think his name was Thomas Drake, actually was convicted of something falsely. And that's what they did to try to shut them up. And they waited a long time to try to bring a lawsuit. The statute of limitations had run at that point. But, and I couldn't help them. But these people were in there on the ground floor when this really was ramped up during prior administrations. And then I had another whistleblower that came forward. And of course, we know more and more about what's been going on with President Trump and how they illegally violated his Fourth Amendment rights. So it's a terrible situation. And, you know, I take my hat off to my friend Andrew Napolitano on Fox News. He's really bucked the trend there. He even wrote an article on their website last week saying that Kavanaugh is a swamp creature, it should never have been confirmed, and asking the same thing that I did, basically go find another judge, in effect, but for the Supreme Court. So
Hopefully.
It's a really important amendment to our Constitution, and you cannot have a Supreme Court justice that doesn't have respect for it.
Yeah, it's very scary, and I always appreciate getting your legal analysis of these kinds of things because I think that they're so complicated the average person can't necessarily understand, particularly when what they're being told is coming from Anderson Cooper or, you know, any of these gigantic news agencies that are right in the pocket of these globalist elites who seek to do that kind of harm to us. And I think that with every passing day, we're seeing why they're coming up with all this stuff, because Donald Trump is a real threat to their status quo. And as you said, we really need these citizen grand juries so that we can have the power in the hands of the people. Because, you know, when I went just last week, I haven't published this video because really nothing happened, but after I visited Debbie Wasserman Schultz's office inquiring if she was in fact related to the wife of Michael Mirando. Michael Mirando, the U.S. attorney who was prosecuting Imran Awan, is married to a woman whose maiden name is Wasserman. Now, of course, it's a very common last name, but I found it strange that Debbie Wasserman's brother, Stephen Wasserman, is an assistant U.S. attorney working in the very same office as Michael Mirando. When I called Michael Mirando to share evidence that I had about the case he was working on, he literally hung up the phone on me. He was nowhere to be found in that U.S. attorney's office. I waited for over an hour trying to see him. Why do you suppose a prosecuting attorney wouldn't want to hear evidence from a member of the public in an ongoing case? Did I do something inappropriate by contacting him?
Because these prosecutors are politicians. You remember that book and the movie Bonfire of the Vanities?
Yes.
You know, which was about a prosecutor that wanted to run for mayor. Okay, they're politicians, and they know that if they take a strong action and go against the elite, and this prosecutor was probably a Democrat, I suspect, that they're never going to go anywhere in terms of an appointment. And that's the way it works. You know, Jason, we should have a show where we really talk about what Congress can do constructively to change our laws. They don't have the guts to go against their fellow criminals in Washington, D.C.,
right.
But we need a new method of selecting prosecutors. We need a new method of selecting judges so they're not political hacks, because 90% of them, when it gets to these kinds of cases, are political hacks on both sides of the political spectrum. And we need really to start talking seriously about impeachment of public officials and judges. But we don't have that right now. And it's a very serious situation. And then, of course, you know, years ago I started Judicial Watch. The word means what it says, the two words, watching judges.
Right.
Because these judges are so compromised and frequently corrupt. No one was looking at them. The FBI doesn't want to look at them because the FBI depends on them for convictions. And, you know, they can dig up dirt on the judges. So that doesn't happen. But how do you deal with a judge who makes a political decision that's unethical? You have to go to some other judges in the same courthouse that the judge who committed an ethical violation eats lunch with or parties with, and these judges cover for each other. We need to change that, because without these judges, and I do believe there are our most important public servants in civil, but they're not. They fall. Without them, we are left defenseless, and that is why when we do our citizens' grand juries, we will have an honest judge who is in there meting out justice on the merits, not on the basis of politics. It's why we're going to have juries that are going to hear the evidence and indict, convict, and we'll have that judge sentenced, and then we'll seek to do citizens' arrest, because we don't have the justice system. And the judges.
Now, Larry, once you have that judgment, I'm losing you a little bit there, Larry. Your Skype connection's breaking up. But I presume you've got a judge that you've already selected. The venue is selected there in Dallas, Texas. Once you get that judgment, because I think the most treacherous aspect of what you're describing sounds like a citizen's arrest. If citizens attempt to arrest somebody like Hillary Clinton, she's undoubtedly got Secret Service detail and armed guards that would likely kill somebody. Once the Freedom Watch Justice League succeeds in forming, impaneling the grand jury and achieving a judgment, can't that judgment be taken to the U.S. Marshals or someone with authority to carry out the arrest? Does it have to be a citizen's arrest?
I will seek to do that. Yes, there is authority for that. Okay, and we will attempt that. But let me give a good example, another example of the people. The power of Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement to effect change. The power of Nelson Mandela, who for 20-some years was locked up in prison, and through the courage of his convictions brought the government of South Africa down, the total apartheid regime. And if the people have convictions, and if we appear in front of Ms. Hillary's house with thousands of people, I think she may actually have to come to Jesus with that, or come to Moses, as your case may be, because she'll realize that she has no choice but to submit. And in history, Mahatma Gandhi is another example of it. The power of the people. You got to read our website. Go to freedomwatchusa.org. freedomwatchusa.org. Strongly donations. We need the help. We need to ramp up. And read the comments on the 27,000 people who have signed the petition to make me special counsel, because they're talking a lot about the citizens' grand juries. We can do both. I can be special counsel, and I can be citizens' grand jury prosecutor. And I won't, even if I'm never a special counsel, the citizens' grand juries have equal power to a special counsel. But yes, we'll need to enforce that peacefully and legally. And, we're also making a point with selling the powers to be, as Jefferson said, when the people fear the government, there's tyranny, but when the government fears the people, there's liberty. So, and let me add one other thing about the Justice League. One of the great lines, because I saw the movie a couple times in the last few weeks going back and forth to Washington. One of the great lines is when Batman confronts one of the evildoers, a disciple of Steppenwolf, who's going to take over the world. And he's got him cornered, and he's about ready to throw him off a building. And this evildoer says to him, "What do you want from me?" And Batman responds, "Fear." Right? That was a great line, because that's exactly what Jefferson said. When the government fears the people, there will be liberty and justice.
Exactly. And Larry, I really appreciate you educating me and our audience about this power, because I certainly had no idea that this was something that could even be done. And I think most people, particularly I'm seeing comments right now, I think most people are fed up with this. I might respectfully disagree with you, prosecutor. I don't know if Hillary Clinton will have a come to Jesus moment and give up. I fear she will never give up and would have to be dragged by authorities, not by me or any of our viewers, but hopefully the U.S. Marshals, out of that Chappaqua home kicking and screaming, where she can finally be brought to justice.
Let's remember that the devil's done a lot of mischief over time, but that Yahweh, if you're Jewish, and Jesus and the Father, if you're Christian, I think we've won every major battle so far. And with regard to the Muslims, in 6,000 years, they haven't won one major battle. And the Judeo-Christian ethic has prevailed. So I think it will prevail again. And, Hillary's obstinance, it'll come to an end. And, we can only hope. But the people will need to take matters into their own hands. And that's the way we did it. You can see that on our website. We have a video. I have a Western town. You have people walking down the street in a Western town. That's the way we did it before 1870, before we had a Justice Department. The people meted out justice. That's why we have juries. That's why, our founding fathers were smart enough to take the power away from judges to make decisions in criminal cases in particular. They didn't trust the judges. The judges of King George III were corrupt, like our current judges are largely corrupt. And they wanted the people to make the decision. And that was one of the smartest things, if not the smartest thing, short of the Fourth Amendment, that they put into our Constitution, the right of a jury trial.
And you know, Larry, as time goes on, the videos that you and I are creating are accumulating thousands and thousands of views. And I hope as we move into the future and these things become historical documents of what's going on in the United States and around the world today, I hope that people will look at them, and at the very least, what I feel you're doing is educating people about some of these really troubling problems with our justice system and the way it's structured. And at very least, I think we're identifying the things that need to be changed. And as you said, we're not getting that from Fox or MSNBC. So I do want to encourage people to go to freedomwatchusa.org and to support the work that you're doing. And at the same time, I hope that people will support Crowdsource the Truth by going to patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth and becoming monthly sponsors, so we can continue to explore these types of things. I personally feel that today's summit between President Trump and Vladimir Putin was a really good step in the right direction as far as taking down the deep state goes. And I really feel that that's a major reason why we're seeing this flurry of activity of people denouncing President Trump. I thought it was interesting that Putin commended him for having a personal involvement in moving the diplomacy forward with North Korea. I think Donald Trump is doing an excellent job.
I do too, and I urge people to donate to Crowdsource the Truth. You're vital, Jason.
Thank you.
We're partners in many ways. Let me point out one other interesting fact.
Yes.
Rupert Murdoch, the owner of Fox News, the owner of Fox General, was caught, his family, wiretapping and getting into the cell phones of the royal family in Great Britain a few years ago.
Crazy.
They were nearly all indicted. And I think that's one reason why Rupert Murdoch doesn't go after the deep state. Fox has never been critical of the NSA. It was only Eric Bolling, and they've thrown him off of Fox News. And Napolitano, who stand up to this, because Murdoch himself has engaged in illegal spying on people, at least his companies have. So this is why you need other sources of information. You cannot rely on Fox News. Yes, it's entertainment. I watch it too, but I only watch it for entertainment. And I get so frustrated watching Hannity every night. Same people are on, saying the same thing. We've got all this information. You know, Sarah Carter's a nice person, but frankly, she's there just as a shill for Hannity and some of the others as well. And, you know, what good is the information? What good is it when Tom Fitton comes on and says, oh, I got documents, you know? Unless you use the documents to get justice, it's just entertainment. And that's why the citizens' grand juries are so important, because, you know, we'll take those documents that we got, that other people got, that Congress got, and we will use them and convict these people and seek to have them thrown in the slammer where they belong.
I am so looking forward to that, Larry, and I'm going to do everything I can to help you with it. I will be booking a plane ticket to Dallas, Texas, so I can be there to cover the citizens' grand juries. Larry, will we be able to have cameras in the proceedings?
I'm going to open it up. I want everybody to see that what we're doing is legal and copacetic and kosher, whatever your ethnic or religious background may be.
Right.
Cool. Okay. Because we're going to choose the voters from neutral voter rolls, the jurors from neutral voter rolls. We're not going to pack it. The evidence is so strong that anybody with any degree of integrity would have to convict Hill and Hillary Clinton.
Wow.
Of God knows, I mean, tens of crimes that they need to be held accountable for.
Yeah. That's just the short list.
Yeah. So we're going to do it the right way, and we're not going to cook it. We're going to do it as the founding fathers envisioned that we should do it, with honest and ethical citizens who believe in justice. And without a justice system, our country will soon collapse, because it will lose the respect not just of the American people, but the world. And without that respect, we can't have a government. And that's what Jefferson was saying. He said, we're going to have a revolution probably every other generation. And we're going to have to clean house, because the corruption's going to metastasize. It's going to become cancerous. And right now we're at that point, and we know that, and the people see that. So go to freedomwatchusa.org, read the comments, because this is where the people are right now, and they're behind us, and we need everybody behind us. So please support us.
Absolutely. Larry, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to talk with us right here. This has been a really important day. The meeting, the summit between President Trump and President Putin has, I think, turned a corner for international events and even domestic, particularly with regard to this whole Trump Russia collusion investigation. We're going to have to keep our eyes on that very closely. And of course, the Citizens Grand Jury is really fantastic. I want to thank Larry Klayman of freedomwatchusa.org. People can find him there on the internet. And you can also, of course, follow Larry on Twitter. If you're not doing that already, he is there at Larry E. Klayman, and he's the founder of Freedom Watch USA and Judicial Watch, and he is going to be the prosecutor in a citizens grand jury. Larry, have a great afternoon. Thanks for joining me.
God bless.
God bless you, sir. I'll see you.